533, and nevertheless he sat, and this is two lines before the end of the page.
Uh-huh.
It's just the paragraph is the spirit moving him, and it's in the middle of the paragraph.
Ah, okay, I found it. Yes.
Spirit
Nevertheless, because
nevertheless.
I lost it because when it finished, I was not looking at the page. Okay. Nevertheless, he sat tight, just viewing the slightly soiled photo, creased by opulent curves, none the worse for wear, however, and looked away thoughtfully with the intention of not further increasing the other's possible embarrassment while gauging her symmetry of heaving endpoint. So it is funny to see how he doesn't want to bother Stephen when he looks at the photograph, no? Uh, in fact, the slight soiling was only an added charm, like the case of linen slightly soiled, good as new, much better, in fact, with the starch out. So he thinks that Stephen likes the picture, the photograph, yes? Uh, Suppose she was gone when he, and look at this thought. Suppose she was gone when he comes back. No, if Molly has abandoned him. So now the thought is about Molly. No, I looked for the lamp which he told me came into his mind, but merely as a passing fancy of his, because he then recollected the morning littered bed, etc., and the book about Ruby, with met him pike horses, sick, in it, which must have fell down sufficiently appropriately beside the domestic chamber pot with apologies to Lindley Murray. So he remembers the morning when he learned that Boylan was going to see or to visit Molly. And now he is afraid of Molly having abandoned him. The vicinity of the young man he certainly relished, educated, distinguished, and impulsive into the bargain. Far and away the pick of the bunch, though you wouldn't think he had it in him yet, you would. Besides, he said the picture was handsome. So this is what Stephen answered, no? That the picture was handsome. Which, say what you like, it was, though at the moment she was distinctly stouter. And why not? An awful lot of make believe went on about that sort of thing involving a lifelong slur with the usual splash page of gutter press about the same old matrimonial tangle. So he's thinking of all these uh, things that people say that books wrote about this lifelong slur, como el estiramiento, ¿no? De la vida matrimonial, with the usual splash page of gutter press about the same old matrimonial tangle, alleging misconduct with professional golfer, or the newest stage favorite, instead of being honest and above board about the whole business. So he says people have lovers. The new professional golfer, imagine this, no? Now we could say that some women have affairs with the tennis teacher. At that time, could be the golfer. Or the newest stage favorite, instead of being honest. And so he thinks now, Molly has been honest in a way because Bloom knows that Boylan is her lover. How they were fated to meet, and an attachment sprang up between the two so that their names were coupled in the public eye. This is true because everybody knew about their relationship. Was told in court with letters containing the habitual mushy and compromising expressions. This is very and compromising expressions, leaving no loophole to show that they openly cohabited 2 or 3 times a week at some well-known seaside hotel, and relations, when the thing ran its normal course, became in due course intimate. This is what happened with, of course, Parnell and the woman, no? They met, yes, every 3 days, etc., and then they finally lived together. Then the decree Nisai. Este
I'm
es el,
sorry, I'm lost.
it says then the decree. Are you there?
Okay. Then the decree and the
Nisai.
king.
Este es el decreto que tenía que firmar el rey para dar el divorcio. Then the decree Nisai. And the king's proctor tries to show cause why, and he failing to quash it, Nisai was made absolute. Absolute meaning that the two were completely divorced, no? But as for that, the two misdemeanants porque eran los dos que así cometieron el delito, ella y Parnell. The two misdemeanants, wrapped up as they largely were in one another, could safely afford to ignore it, as they very largely did, till the matter was put in the hands of a solicitor who filed a petition for the party wronged in due course. And this is similar to Claudia was saying before. The one who was wronged, digamos, el ofendido, this is Kathy's husband, asked a solicitor to file a petition. Yes, a lawyer who had to defend him. He, B is the captain, enjoyed the distinction of being close to Erin's uncrowned king in the flesh when the thing occurred on the historic fracas when the fallen leaders, who notoriously stuck to his guns to the last drop, even when clothed in the mantle of adultery. Leaders, trusty henchmen to the number of 10 or a dozen, or possibly even more than that Ireland, by no means by the by appropriate appellative. Than that penetrated into the printing works of the insuppressible. Oh no, it was United Ireland, by no means by the by appropriate appellative, and broke up the type cases with hammers. So the original party was insuppressible. And now they founded the United Ireland, taking Parnell out of the party, or something like that, all on account of some scurrilous effusions from the facile pens of the Brainit scribes. O'Brien was the leader who was against Parnell in the same party, but he was against Parnell within the party. And he pushed Parnell outside and created the new party, United Ireland. At the usual.
Against Parnell or with Parnell?
Without.
Without.
Claro, O'Brien was the leader who pushed Parnell or expelled Parnell, no? O'Brien ascribes that the usual mudslinging occupation reflecting on the erstwhile tribune's private morals. Bueno, the cause of the separation was private morals, because Parnell's private life was the problem. Though palpably a radically altered man, he was still a commanding figure. Though carelessly garbed as usual, with that look of settled purpose, wait, because I have to move the of settled purpose, which went a long way with the Shilly-Shalliers till they discovered, to their vast discomfiture, that their idol had feet of clay. After placing him upon a pedestal, which she, however, was the first to perceive. As those were particularly hot times in the general hullabaloo, Bloom sustained a minor injury from a nasty prod of some chap's elbow. So, again, the same idea, no? That the other men expelled Parnell. He was an idol of clay feet, no? Un ídolo con pies de barro. And he was expelled from the party. Bloom is.
How do you see con pies de barro?
Ídolo con pies de barro, sí.
But how do you see in English?
Clay feet, and a leader with clay feet. And so, a nasty prod of some chap's elbow in the crowd that, of course, congregated, lodging someplace about the pit of the stomach. Fortunately, not a grave character. His hat, Parnell's, a silk one, was inadvertently knocked off. Volvemos a la anécdota. And as a matter of strict history, Bloom was the man who picked it up in the crash after witnessing the occurrence, meaning to return it to him. And return it to him he did with the utmost celerity, who panting and hatless, because Parnell was in the middle of a mob, and that's why he lost his hat, panting and hatless, and whose thoughts were miles away from his hat at the time, all the same being a gentleman born with a stake in the country, he, as a matter of fact, having gone into it more for the kudos of the thing than anything else, what's bred in the bone, instilled into him in infancy at his mother's knee, in the shape of knowing what good form was, came out at once because he turned round to the donor and thanked him with perfect aplomb, saying, "Thank you, sir," though in a very different tone of voice from the ornament of the legal profession, whose headgear Bloom also set to rights earlier in the course of the day. History repeating itself with a difference. After the burial of a mutual friend, when they had left him alone in his glory, after the grim task of having committed his remains to the grave. So, again, the same idea, no? That Parnell was a hero. He was very well educated. He thanked Bloom when Bloom gave him the hat back. But Bloom, in a way, feels that Parnell's destiny was unfair, no? Because he fought for Ireland, he obtained a lot of things, and then he was abandoned simply because he had an affair with a woman, no? On the other hand, what incensed him more inwardly was the blatant jokes of the cabman. Why does he feel so bad about the jokes? Because the men there, they were all men, they were making jokes about Parnell and about the woman's husband. And Bloom felt affected, yes, personally,
Yes.
and so on, who passed it all off as a jest, laughing immoderately, ¿sí? Se reían sin moderación, pretending to understand everything, the why and the wherefore, and in reality, not knowing their own minds. It being a case for the two parties themselves. This is what Bloom thinks, that this is a case for the two parties. This is something that the husband and the wife and the lover had to decide, not for the others. Yes. Um, so for the two, wait a second, being a case for the two parties themselves, unless it ensued that the legitimate husband happened to be a party to it, owing to some anonymous letter from the usual boy Jones. Apparently, the one who um, said these things and as said it publicly was a man called Jones, who was a kind of spy into the party, no, an internal spy, who happened to come across them at the crucial moment in a loving position, locked in one another's arms, drawing attention to their illicit proceedings and leading up to a domestic rumpus and the erring fair, one begging forgiveness of her lord and master upon her knees and promising to sever the connection. This is what apparently they said, that Kathy asked forgiveness from her husband on her knees, no, the rodillas, not to receive his visits anymore if only the aggrieved husband would overlook the matter and let bygones be bygones be bygones, with tears in her eyes, though possibly with her tongue in her fair cheek at the same time, as quite possibly there were several others. He personally, being of a skeptical bias, see, so Bloom feels that he's skeptical, no, believed and didn't make the smallest bones about saying so. Either that man or men in the plural were always hanging around on the waiting list about a lady, even supposing she was the best wife in the world, and they got on fairly well together for the sake for the sake of argument, when, neglecting her duties, she chose to be tired of wedded life. So this is possibly Molly's situation according to Bloom. It is important to see this because then Molly will explain her situation in the last chapter, no? Here Bloom thinks that she is tired of um, of wedded life, and was on for a little flutter in polite debauchery to press their attentions on her with improper intent, the upshot being that her affections centered on another. The cause of many liaisons between still attractive married women getting on for fair and 40. So this is the explanation he finds, no? That women are tired of married life, and so they accept the situation with men who are younger, no? Because he says getting on for fair and 40 and younger men. No doubt, as several famous cases of feminine infatuation proved up to the hilt. It was a thousand pities a young fellow, blessed with an allowance of brains, as his neighbor obviously was, should waste his valuable time with profligate women who might present him with a nice dose. A nice dose es una veneria, ¿sí? Que le podía dar una veneria, to last him his lifetime. So, what Bloom thinks is that it's a pity that a young man like Stephen wastes his time with prostitutes instead of looking for women. I mean, for other women, no, not prostitutes. In the nature of single blessedness, he would one day take unto himself a wife. When Miss Wright came on the scene, no, Miss Wright would be the perfect wife for Stephen, no. But in the interim, lady society was a conditio sine qua non, though he had the gravest possible doubts. Not that he wanted in the smallest to pump Stephen about Miss Ferguson, who was very possibly the particular lodestar who brought him down to Irish Town so early in the morning. As to whether he would find much satisfaction basking in the boy and girl courtship idea, and the company of smirking misses without a penny to their names, buy or try weekly with the orthodox preliminary canter of compliment playing and walking out leading up to fond lovers' ways and flowers and chocolates. Flowers and chocolates, no? So, Bloom understands that Stephen is not the kind of man who go courting, no? Either with a girl with no money, giving her flowers and chocolates and yes, etc., etc. No, to think of him house and homeless, rooked by some landlady worse than any stepmother, was really too bad at his age. So Bloom thinks that Stephen must look for a woman who can give him money because he is very poor. He cannot have a girlfriend and give her chocolates, no, because he is poor. And so he cannot live, as he says, with some landlady, sorry, worse than any stepmother in a kind of pension. The queer suddenly thinks he popped out with attracted the elder man who was several years the other senior, or like his father. But something substantial he certainly ought to eat, even were it only an egg flip made on an unadulterated maternal nutriment, or failing that, the homely Humpty Dumpty boiled. So now Bloom thinks that Stephen needs to eat.
I need a minute.
Yes.
Sorry.
He thinks that Stephen needs to eat at least one boiled egg, at least. And that he cannot go back. He doesn't have a house. He doesn't have a place to go. So this is the preliminary to Bloom's invitation to his house, because Bloom is going to invite Stephen to his own house. At what o'clock did you dine? He questioned, of the slim form and tired though unwrinkled face. Sometime yesterday, Stephen said. Yesterday, exclaimed Bloom, till he remembered it was already tomorrow, Friday. Ah, you mean it's after 12? The day before yesterday, Stephen said, improving on himself. Imagine Bloom's reaction, no? Uh, Yesterday, exclaims Bloom, till he remembered it was already tomorrow, Friday. Ah, you mean it's after 12? The day before yesterday, Stephen said, improving on himself. Literally astounded at this piece of intelligence, Bloom reflected. Though they didn't see eye to eye in everything, a certain analogy there somehow was. So now Bloom thinks that he and Stephen have certain analogy. They have things in common. Yes. Uh, Remember that this is the father and son relationship that starts creating, no? There somehow was as if both their minds were traveling, so to speak, in the one train of thought. Yes, Malena.
Yes, I wonder if that coincidence is something that Bloom is thinking about, and it is not shared with Stephen, I suppose.
We will see at the end of the chapter, and even in the next chapter, when Bloom invites Stephen to his house, that Stephen finds this connection with Bloom.
Oh, okay.
Not at this moment. This is at the beginning of the connection, let's say. But then Stephen finds in Bloom a father image. Yes, because Bloom is the one who gives him food,
Okay.
and he offers him his house.
But up to now, we don't see some interest, some recognition from Stephen.
No, only from Bloom.
Okay.
Yes. So he says, at his age, when dabbling in politics, no, when Bloom was young, and he was interested in politics when he was Stephen's age, roughly some score of years previously, when he had been a quasi aspirant to parliamentary honors in the backshot Foster days, he too recollected in retrospect, which was a source of keen satisfaction in itself, he had a sneaking regard for those same ultra ideas. Because I told you last time that Bloom was a Marxist when he was young.
Yes.
For instance, when the evicted tenants question, then at its first inception, bulked largely in people's mind, though it goes without saying, not contributing a copper or pinning his faith absolutely to its dictums, some of which wouldn't exactly hold water, he, at the outset, in principle, at all events, was in thorough sympathy with peasant possession as voicing the trend of modern opinion. So, when the problem of the possession of the lands appeared, yes, when he was young, he was in favor of the trend, in favor of peasant possession. He wanted the lands in the hands of the of the peasants.
The producers.
Claro.
The land is for the people that work in them.
Exactly. So at that time, he had that opinion. Partially, however, which realizing his mistake, he was subsequently particularly cured of. ¿Sí? Esto es divertido. Se curó de esa idea. Se curó como si fuera una enfermedad. Cured of. Es muy divertido.
What people think about the philosophy letters students.
Yes.
That they will become more
yes.
less Marxists than they are when they are young. They are young. Yes.
Yes. So here he says that he was cured of that, and even was tweeted with going a step further than Michael Davitt in the striking views he at one time inculcated as a back to the lander. Esa era la idea, de nuevo a los propietarios de la tierra, back to the lander, which was one reason he strongly resented the innuendo put upon him so barefaced a fashion by our friend at the gathering of the clans in Barney Keenan's. so that he, though often considerably misunderstood and the least pugnacious of mortals, be it repeated, departed from his customary habit to give him metaphorically one in the gizzard, though so far as politics themselves were concerned, because he was a radical at that time, no? Uh, he was only too conscious of the casualties invariably resulting from propaganda and displays of mutual animosity and the misery and suffering it entailed as a foregone conclusion on fine young fellows, chiefly destruction of the fittest, in a word. So he abandoned those ideas because he thought that they were too combative, too. They fought, and good people were destroyed. The destruction of the fittest. And this phrase, "destruction of the fittest," is taken from the famous idea, no? The one who survives is the fittest. Claro, no? The idea of those who survive. Darwin's idea. Here it is the opposite, no?
Yes, he is against of violence.
Against violence, and he thought that those ideas were very violent at that time. Anyhow, upon weighing upon the pros and cons, getting on for one as it was high time to be retiring for the night. So now he decided that they have to retire. The crux was a bit risky to bring him home, as eventualities might possibly ensue. Why? What eventualities? He's afraid of going back home with Stephen and finding Boylan in bed with Molly. Eventualities. Somebody having a temper of her own sometimes. And who is this somebody who has a temper? Molly. Perhaps Molly gets angry and spoiled the hash altogether, as on the night he misguidedly brought home a dog. He remembers once he brought home a dog, breed unknown, with a lame paw. Not that the cases were either identical or the reverse, though he had hurt his hand too, to Ontario Terrace, as he very distinctly remembered, having been there, so to speak. So once in the past, he brought a dog to his house because the dog had a problem in the paw. Tenía la mano lastimada. But apparently Molly was very angry, no? On the other hand, it was altogether far and away too late for the Sandy Mount or Sandy Cove suggestion. Obviously, Stephen can't go back to Sandy Mount. You remember the tower? He cannot go back there because it was too late. So that he was in some perplexity as to which of the two alternatives. Everything pointed to the fact that it behoved him to avail himself to the full of the opportunity, all things considered. His initial impression was he was a shade standoffish or not over effusive, but it grew on him some way. For one thing, he mightn't what you call jump at the idea, if approached. And what mostly worried him was he didn't know how to lead up to it or word it exactly. So he doesn't know how to tell Stephen that he wants to invite him. Supposing he did entertain the proposal. No, the problem is that he doesn't want to offend Stephen, no? Um, as it would afford him a very great personal pleasure if he would allow him to help to put coin in his way or some wardrobe. So he wants to help Stephen. He wants to give him some money, to give him some clothes, no? Well, but he doesn't want to offend Stephen. If found suitable. At all events, he wound up by concluding, eschewing for the nonce hidebound precedent a cup of Epps cocoa and a shakedown for the night. So he's going to invite Stephen to a cup of cocoa and a shakedown for the night, como que se despeje, ¿sí? plus the use of a rag or two, an overcoat, double into a pillow, at least he would be in safe hands. And as warm as a toast on a trivet, he failed to perceive any very vast amount of harm in that, always with the proviso, no rumpus of any sort was picked up. So he's ready to invite Stephen to have a cup of cocoa and to give him a place to sleep, because he can give him a rag on the floor and some clothes to use as
That's a bit.
yes, that's right. A move had to be made because that merry old soul, the grass widower in question, who appeared to be glued to the spot, didn't appear in any particular hurry to wend his way home to his dearly beloved Queenstown. And it was highly likely some Sponger's body house of retired beauties. A body house is the place where the prostitutes are. And he says, of retired beauties, un prostíbulo de viejas, ¿sí? Where age was no bar off, Sheriff Street lower would be the best clue to that equivocal character's whereabouts for a few days to come. So he's afraid of Stephen going back to the whorehouse. So it's better to take him to his house. Alternately racking their feelings, the mermaids, with six-chamber revolver anecdotes verging on the tropical, calculated to freeze the marrow of anybody's bones, and mauling their large-sized charms, between whiles with rough and tumble gusto to the accompaniment of large potations of potheen and the usual blarney about himself, for as to who he in reality was, let X equal my right name and address. So he's afraid of Stephen going back to the prostitutes and living with them for some days, talking to them, no, and entertaining them, no, as Mr. Algebra remarks passing. At the same time, he inwardly chuckled over his gentle repartee to the blood and ounce champion about his God being a Jew. Vuelve a la idea, ¿no? Your God was a Jew. People could put up with being bitten by a wolf, but what properly riled them was a bite from the sheep. This is again a very interesting idea, no? People could hate being bitten by a wolf, but they hate the most being riled by a sheep. Cuando el que te acobarda es la oveja y no el lobo, ¿no? The most vulnerable point too of tender Achilles. Your God was a Jew, because mostly they appear to imagine he came from Carrick-on-Shannon or somewhere abouts in the county Sligo. So Bloom...
We have less than 9 minutes.
Okay, so this is page 537 in my edition, of course. And I think that perhaps you can finish the chapter on your own, so that next time we start the new chapter. Is that okay?
Okay.
17.
Okay.
There is nothing very difficult, only that that Bloom convinces Stephen to go with him. Stephen at this point is still rather, confused, tired, sleepy. So he's not. He's not going to oppose any resistance, because he doesn't know where to go.